world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Tuesday, the 14th of April, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today, we're going to take a look at Trump's lie of the day. It seems like every day we have another lie, and of course, this one is a whopper, especially because it's so obviously a lie, but it's getting more and more so that way every day. We're also going to take a look at the dire straits that he's put the entire global economy into as he has constipated Hormuz. You can't block it. I'm going to block it. So we got double blockage here. We need to have some kind of an operation to remove this. But Israel has the perfect thing, Operation Eternal Darkness. Yeah, just own it. Just own the Satanism. Why don't you? So we're going to take a look at this. Is there a move to make Netanyahu the new Fauci in order to protect Trump, to give him an excuse? Does he get an excuse on this? Does he get a pass? And we're going to take a look at Bilderberg. Remember that? They just finished their meeting on Sunday. And it's kind of interesting who was there. Always about the only thing we can figure out is who is there. We can make some understanding of who is running things by taking a look at that. We'll be right back. That's right. When we look at, as we're going to begin with the news, though, in general, and here's something close to home, real close to home, property taxes. Property taxes rose 3% on average across the United States in 2025, outpacing even inflation. Well, outpacing the inflation as they calculate it. The inflation numbers, folks, and the job numbers are a lie. Like most things that come out of Washington. Is there any truth coming out of Washington? Diogenes could wander around that place for his entire life and never find an honest man, I think. But homeowners in 2025 paid a total of $396.8 billion in property taxes on more than 89 million single-family homes, a 3.7% increase from the year prior to that. And I'll just go back and remind everybody, it doesn't have to be this way. We could have a situation where you're actually able to own real estate. We don't have to constantly rent it from the government. As a matter of fact, I've spoken to him a couple of times. The guy who ran for governor in Indiana as a libertarian, Donald Rainwater, he had it's kind of like Rand Paul's plan to gradually pay down the deficit and get it down. But he had a great way, Donald Rainwater did, of getting us out of property taxes. People didn't vote for it, though, in Indiana. They are locked into this left-right Republican mindset. But Donald Rainwater said, well, let's just make it 7%. It's like make it a sales tax instead of a property tax that is perpetual. And so you can pay that 7% at closing and just fold it into your 30-year mortgage, or you can pay 1% a year for 7 years, and then you're done. You don't have to worry about the government stealing your property. How many times have we seen elderly people who, because there was a small property tax bill on their old, tiny home, they got behind it and the locality confiscated it because, hey, it's now downtown and we could use that for some very valuable commercial real estate. So we just stole your home. But they steal it anyway. And understand that the key in all of this, what makes the local tax people so hungry for your homeowners, for your property taxes, rather, is the schools. The schools that are poisoning our society, poisoning the minds of our children. That's really what needs to change, even more so. The average single-family home paid $4,400 in taxes, up 3% from 2024. And a higher effective tax rate. And of course, this is the game that they always play. I remember when in North Carolina, you would see them. One year, they would go up on the tax rate. The next year, they would go up on the tax valuation because of inflation. And that's the true problem with all this. You're being taxed on the devaluation of the dollar. So the government devalues the dollar, and then they raise your taxes based on that. So it's really kind of a tax on inflation in order to pay for government schools. I'm sick of it. We look at tomorrow, of course, is April the 15th. We're all the MAGA people. Remember when they said, well, Trump's going to put on these massive tariffs, but he's going to do that so they can get rid of the income tax. And it's like, yeah, right. We've had a lot of people say, we ought to change the way that we tax. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it. We've had flat taxes. We've had Herman Cain with his 999 stuff. We've had all these different proposals. But the fly in the ointment has always been the understanding that if you put in one of these new schemes, then they're going to keep the income tax. You're going to wind up with two taxes, which is what Donald Trump was able to pull off. Because now, as to paraphrase Ben Sass, politics is really about the weird worship of some dude. That's really what MAGA has become. He nailed that 10 years ago. Yeah, the weird worship of some dude. That's what politics has become for MAGA. Final quarter of 2019, the median price of homes sold was $327,000. By the end of 2025, that had jumped by 24% to $405,000. And they are pricing everybody out of homes. That's the bottom line. Average tax bills in New Jersey were the highest, $10,500, followed by Connecticut at $8,900 and New Hampshire at $8,174. The lowest were in West Virginia at just $1,000. So the property taxes in New Jersey are 10 times what they are in West Virginia. Interesting. And Alabama is very close to West Virginia as well, $1,284. So the Federal Reserve says without Trump's tariffs, inflation would have dropped to pre-pandemic levels during 2025. We just can't get inflation below that lockdown monkey wrench that Trump threw into the economy. And he keeps throwing in more and more monkey wrenches. This guy is a bull in a china shop, or I should say a BS artist in a china shop, isn't he? New study finds that tariffs were responsible for the entirety of the excess inflation in the core goods category. And again, this is Trump and his egonomics and his ego politics, not geopolitics, but ego politics. He's never, and I said this from the very beginning, when you look at tariffs versus an income tax, we could have that discussion, but it's getting both of them at the same time. And his tariffs are not the reason that we had tariffs in the past. At the time of Jefferson, the tariffs were small tariffs were enough to fund the entire federal government because it was small enough to fit in the Constitution. By the time you got to the late 1800s, the tariffs were used to protect cronies, to protect certain industries. And there's an element of that with this. But what Trump is basically using the tariffs for is as his own personal political weapon. And we got more of that happening right now. He's threatening China. He says, massive destructive tariffs if you help Iran. Except that he doesn't have any sense even of his own history, let alone of American history. He's threatening them with 50% tariff rates, even though in the past he's put, I think it got as high as, 140% or something at one point for a day or two. And then he removed it.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think it was 140%. And I think it was only there for an afternoon.
Yeah. Then he tacoed out. So tariffs implemented by Trump are entirely to blame for the recent surge in prices for consumer and household goods. And so is his war. This guy is destroying our economy, just like I said this about him. He's not a businessman. He's a crook, and he can't even run a casino at a profit. He's destroyed a half dozen casinos that he ran. He likes to say, yeah, we hold all the cards. Well, he held all the cards as the house, and he set the rules when he was the house at the casino, and he still couldn't run the thing. It's pathetic. Of course, it was largely money laundering that was happening, according to testimony from some people who said that. And he's money laundering stuff through the casino, so he doesn't care if they make money or not. And he's laundering money through the White House with his massive corruption, so he doesn't care if the rest of us are going broke or not. So the new study was done by economists at the Federal Reserve. As of February, the tariffs, they said, quote, can explain the entirety of the excess inflation of the core goods category since January 2025. They concluded our estimates indicate that tariff effects on prices gradually build over time. Yeah, that's the key. We talked about all this stuff and oh yeah, Donald Trump, he's nothing but a tax and spend Democrat. And all these people saying, oh, this is great. We're going to get rid of the income tax. Donald Trump is going to save us. And look, there's no inflation. He put these things on yesterday, and I don't see the prices going up today. They build over time, just like what he's doing right now with his economic warfare in Iran. It builds over time. So are you going to have a huge effect, what he has done? And the longer he leaves this there, the longer the tail is going to be. And so it's going to be a very long experience with Trump. The key thing, I think, is to get rid of this guy, whatever happens. I mean, if he's going to destroy our economy, if he's going to create a global depression, he's got to go, regardless of the Democrats, what they're going to do. Certainly they're going to be damaging, but you're going to see what the damage is with them. You're going to oppose that. Whereas with Trump, he's built this creepy cult that coalesces around him all the time. So the cumulative effects, 7 months after the implementation, were consistent with our theoretical measures of full dollar-for-dollar pass-through. And we know that's the case. If your cost goes up on your business, you have to pass it along. There's very few businesses, maybe Pfizer, some of those people like that can swallow a big hit and not pass it along. But of course, they would be the first ones to pass it along. But if you're operating in a competitive environment, you're operating on a fairly small profit margin. And you're going to eventually have to pass along these increases in price, or you're going to go out of business. It's just that simple. Anybody who says otherwise is either a liar, or they've never run a business, or there's somebody like Trump who ran a business into the ground and is a liar as well. Without the price increases caused by the tariffs, price increases for household and consumer goods would have fallen below pre-pandemic trend lines. Can't let that happen. We got to keep the chaos up. And it's kind of interesting. His tariffs and his taxes kind of operate just like his bioweapon injections. The effects build over time, don't they? He's injected this stuff into our economy. The guy is just unbelievable. The new study is just the latest evidence that American consumers are basically paying the full cost of Trump's tariffs. Again, it's MAGA saying he's going to get rid of the income tax. Well, tomorrow is the day. It's still here. Other studies from a variety of sources have found similar results, of course. One recent paper looking at wine tariffs from Trump's first term found that consumers actually paid the full cost of the tariff and then some, thanks to higher markups along the supply chain. But then, of course, the other thing that can happen is that if you go to war with Canada, for example, you become so odious that they decide they're going to boycott American products. And one of those products that they boycotted was bourbon. And so you got all these bourbon distilleries that are going out of business thanks to Trump. Yeah, it's not just the gas prices. He did that as well. And then aluminum. He put on massive tariffs on aluminum, but that's nothing compared to the shock to the system that is happening as he is shutting down these aluminum processing plants in the Middle East because of the Strait of Hormuz insanity. And so they already had a major hit from the tariffs. Now they've got war. The Gulf's largest aluminum producer declared force majeure on parts of its contract book over the weekend. What that means is that in every contract, you always have this clause saying, if there's some major force that is out of our control, it could be war, could be weather, whatever it is, we can say we can't fulfill the contract and you can't sue us for that. So they have invoked that. And so aluminum is going up significantly. It's gone up 18% per year. And these people account for 4% of the world's aluminum production being shut down because of the Strait. So again, who would have thought, right?
I mentioned this briefly the other day around the dinner table, but just the amount of post hoc justification that these Trump supporters are capable of Everything is falling apart. They're looking at the chaos in Iran, and they'll find just some small silver lining somewhere and go, see, guys, this is what it was all about all along. Trump knew that this would happen, and that's why this was important to do. Come on, guys, trust the plan. I'm
truly sick of that. And like I said, Ben Sass said, politics is not about the weird worship of some dude, but that's what this is really about. That's what MAGA is about. That's what it's been about. And of course, the worship leader was Alex Jones. He's now trying to distance himself from this sinking ship.
The thing that makes this obviously a lie to me is that Trump is such a strutting, preening diva that he can't keep his achievements to himself. If this was the goal, he would have been out there outlining it, but he never does that.
That's right.
Come on, if you're the big dog, be like Babe Ruth, call your shot, do it.
Yeah, so I'm going to hit it right over there, and he doesn't do that, yeah. Well, Goldman commodity specialist said it's hard to think of a bigger supply shock to metals, aluminum, and that is going to be a key part of manufacturing. This is the lunacy of what Trump is doing. He's boasting about the fact that, oh yeah, we don't need the Strait of Hormuz. We got all the oil that we need. We got more oil than Saudi Arabia. And we're going to have double that next year because I'm stealing the oil in Venezuela. Pirate, thief. Anyway, the bottom line is that in and of itself is beyond stupid because it's the global economy stupid. We saw that with the OPEC oil embargo in 1973, as I've mentioned many times. That affected only the U.S. supply, and yet it affected things globally because we do have a global market, whether he likes it or not. And he can't shut that down. So when people are desperate for oil in another area, they're going to raise the price, and that's going to raise the price here domestically. Again, we have not been immune to this. His cronies are making a lot of money out of this, but not the average American. And so now, if you remember, after he was shut down at the Supreme Court and he had a temper tantrum about that, he used a different usurpation, twisting the law in a different way to say, well, I can use Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
That's right. Well, it is illegal. And the insanity of this whole thing is that it really does go back to Nixon, the Nixon error, ERROR, and what was happening at that point in time with Bretton Woods and the rest of this stuff. And so it is a misapplication. It is a usurpation of this law to give him the ability. Immediately came back and said, well, I'm going to impose 10% on the world then. And the next day he says 15%, right? That was the max allowed by the Trade Act. Well, immediately the people who were suing over the IEEPA-based tariffs filed another lawsuit. Same group of people. Now, what's interesting about this is that they claimed that if you wanted to do it, IEEPA was the wrong way to do it, that if he wanted to put tariffs on everybody, the plaintiff said he should use this very thing. The Trade Act of 1974. Now they're saying the opposite. But the Trump administration also said the opposite. They said, no, this Trade Act of 1974, the Section 122, does not get us there. That's why we used IEEPA. So both sides have now switched sides, switched what they had to say. Both of them, one of them said, no, we can't use that. The other one said, no, we have to use that. And now they have switched their position. But the reality is that it doesn't apply at all. And what's really kind of interesting about this is that when you look at the technical language of it, it says, quote, fundamental international payments problem would be what you're responding to with this, that is caused by serious U.S. balance of payments deficits. It was specifically about what was happening as, with taking us off Bretton Woods and banning gold being used and that type of thing. It was specifically addressing that particular case. And the plaintiffs are accurately saying that not only do these conditions not exist, but they cannot exist under the current monetary system. Under Bretton Woods too, under the petrodollar, this cannot exist. And that is the economic fact of it. There's a long article on Reason. I'm not going to get into the weeds of exactly how that works, but it does go back to the gold and the deficits and Bretton Woods replacing Bretton Woods 2, replacing the first one back to the 1970s. You got 48 economists, including 2 Nobel Prize winners and several former advisors to Republican presidents, are supporting the plaintiffs and saying this is a complete misapplication of this. This is not what is happening, and it can't happen under the current economic system. Meanwhile, the budget deficit is exploding under Trump. That is the real deficit issue, not the trade deficit, but the budget deficit is something that he needs to look at, but he never talks about that. This is why I say he's such a distraction, such a diversion from our real problems, and he won't do anything about the real problems. As a matter of fact, he exacerbates the real problems. So again, it goes back to the 1970s. It was a unique situation. The Bretton Woods system was abolished in 1976 through the Jamaica Accords. Along with that, the possibility that there could be a balance of payment deficit was also abolished. It was precisely the U.S. balance of payment deficits that precipitated the end of Bretton Woods. And so it is, again, another fiction from the Trump team here. The 1977 statute does not even mention import taxes and has never before been used to impose them. You thought of something nobody else did. It's kind of like the eschatology that we got now in Christianity. It's like, oh, it's funny. Nobody ever saw that in 2,000 years until you guys picked this up. And now that has become supposedly the orthodoxy. I don't subscribe to it. Trump nevertheless claimed to have discovered a hitherto unnoticed power to completely rewrite the tariff schedule that was approved by Congress. Again, he is a usurper and a destroyer of the Constitution. He refuses to put his own house, that is the GOP House of Representatives, they refuse to put that in order. Instead, they keep playing these games with tariffs. You know, don't pay attention to the domestic problems. Your real problem are these people in other countries, and we need to go attack them. We need to attack them economically, and maybe we need to attack them with bombs as well. It's always that, isn't it? Redirect people away from the politicians who are destroying the country from within and redirect them to a foreign enemy. That's what he's been doing in economics for quite some time now.
It reminds me of this picture that I've seen. You know, this black guy protesting the Vietnam War, or I think it was the Vietnam War, and said, you know, no Vietnamese ever called me the N-word. And it's just no Iranian ever tried to forcibly inject me with, you know, mRNA. So,
yeah, that's right. Well, he's out there, as I said before, threatening China with staggering tariffs, he said. Well, he does stagger the tariffs, doesn't he?
They are staggering.
And it's just, again, it's egonomics and ego politics from this guy. Trump reiterated his administration's core objectives in the Middle East, preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, right? And yet, when you stop and think about it, he assassinated the guy who had a religious prohibition of nukes, right? The Ayatollah that he killed had put out a fatwa, and he was the leader of the you got Sunni and you got
Sunni, the Shias.
Yeah, I started to say Sharia, but it's like, no, Sharia is the law. Shia is the sect. The Sunnis are bigger. There's more Sunnis out there than there are Shias.
And then
he was the
Wahhabists as well.
Yeah, that's right. The head choppers in Saudi Arabia. But he was the global leader of Shia. And he'd put out a fatwa saying that this is haram. You can't have nuclear weapons. So we killed that guy. And then we made it clear to the Iranian people that unless you have nuclear weapons, you're going to be constantly attacked by Israel and the United States. Good job, Trump. He reportedly is planning mass pardons of his administration officials before leaving office. Well, let's correct that. It's not before he leaves office in 2029. It's before he gets impeached next year after the Democrats take over. The only question is, will they have control of the Senate so they can actually remove this usurper out of office? And regardless, that's going to be there's going to be a lot of downsides to Democrats in control. But Trump has got to be removed. That's just the bottom line. You look at all the people in the Trump administration, all of them pretty much are guilty of perjury, aren't they? The lies start at the top and work their way down. Most of them are war criminals. They're traitors. Most of them are corrupt as well, financially corrupt. There are a bunch of Hunter Bidens that are in there. It's basically a mafia. And he better pardon them or they're going to start talking about him, aren't they? He said, I'll pardon everyone who comes within 200 feet of the Oval Office. That's the stench of corruption from the Trump administration. That they need to have it. If they get that within 200 feet of Trump, they know that you're corrupt, right? You can't get there without being a criminal. Everyone he knows, they all understand that impeachment is just around the corner and possibly removal, depending on how big the midterm elections are for the Democrats. And when you look at what he's done in terms of pardons, this is a very important power that's been given to the president. Unconditional power to pardon anybody that he chooses. And he has exercised that in an extraordinary amount. Nobody, including Trump and his first administration, nobody's come close to the number of pardons that he's done. Pardons and emergency orders, executive orders. He's not a king, is he? No, he absolutely is a king. So he has put out 1,600 pardons in the first year of his administration, second term. His entire 4 years of his first term, he had 250 pardons. So he's more than 6 times the number of pardons in his first year than he had in his first 4 years combined. It's pretty amazing when you stop and think about it. And it's even more amazing when you look at the long line of grifters, crooks, and criminals and white-collar criminals, huge scam artists, tens of millions of dollars, sometimes more than that, people that he's pardoned. Then, of course, he has a round of golf with them or they make a contribution to his campaign. This, I think, folks, is going to go down. It used to always be said that the most corrupt U.S. administration was the U.S. Grant, Ulysses Grant administration. I think Trump is going to top that by many metrics. The incitement and the engagement in state violence against American people is a serious crime. Trump will leave office long before the 5-year statute of limitations expires. You are hereby put on notice, said Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries. He was talking to the Republicans in the Trump administration, who were people like Stephen Miller, who are pushing ICE to push us into a civil war. Biden issued sweeping preemptive pardons for top officials and family members at the end of his term, including members of his family, Fauci, and the entire January 6th Select Committee. So there you go. There's your whataboutism. So Biden did it. He did it for family members. He did it for the people around him. He did it for Fauci. So Trump can do the same thing. So this is how we set these precedents that keep spiraling in this country down. Yeah, because one guy acted criminally, illegally, immorally, corruptly. Now Trump has got a pass to do that. And I am so sick and tired of seeing the apologists for Trump, always whenever he commits a crime. Oh, well, the Democrats did that too. Fine, lock them both up. But that doesn't set a new precedent. When you got somebody who breaks the law, that doesn't set a precedent so that everybody gets to break the law. That's not the way that we want to go. The Wall Street Journal should learn to take a joke, said the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. However, the president's pardon power is absolute. As people have pointed out many times, his jokes become his actions because the man is a joke. So Biden effectively gave him the cover to act on it, says Zero Hedge. No, he doesn't get the power to do this. This is what is destroying this country. Well, one guy did it, so now everybody can do it. Meanwhile, when we look at what is happening in terms of our economy, not only Our houses becoming unaffordable, cars are becoming unaffordable, and what is it that the government could do about that? Well, the government has a lot to do about that. I mean, they're directly responsible for the taxes, and quite frankly, they're directly responsible for a lot of the reasons why houses and cars are going up because of mandated, useless things that are raising the price of both of those things. But take a look at college. As we look at college and the soaring tuition that has happened there, that, as many people pointed out, you subsidize something from the federal government, and what does it do? It causes it to go up in price. And we have seen college tuition explode. It's just unbelievable. As I've said many times, and I go back and look at what my tuition was when I went to University of South Florida, which was a state institution, so it was relatively cheap. I spent way more on my books than I did on college tuition, not anymore. So now what is happening is you've got people who are graduating from college. The kids are graduating from college. The parents were desperate to get their kids into college. That's going to be the path to prosperity and comfort. And they're going to be taking care of me in my old age, that type of thing. That was always, what they're willing to put up with anything. You have these people who are paying $45,000 to send their kids to a private school in New York, and then privately talking to the press and saying, you can't believe the DEI garbage and the racism and the critical race theory and all the rest of the stuff they're teaching. I can't talk about it, or they'll kick my kid out. So they come to the press anonymously because they're so afraid. They've got to set this trajectory for their kids on the right path. And that means they go to the right school, no matter how expensive it is, go to the right college, no matter how expensive it is. And then they get out and they can't find a job. So now the parents of college students are paying tens of thousands of dollars for career coaches. My favorite example of all of this was a woman who's a pediatrician, and she's going to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get her daughter a job. Her daughter can't find a job. What is her degree? She got a marketing degree, and she can't market herself. Isn't that amazing? That is so true. I remember Jim Rogers, who wrote a book called Investment Biker, and it was a very interesting book. He went around the world on a motorcycle with his girlfriend and making observations about different economies. My favorite observation that he had was that you can always tell how corrupt a government is if you look at the difference between the official exchange rate and the market exchange rate that's there, the black market, if you will. But anyway, he said, somebody contacted me because he worked for George Soros, just like Scott Bessent did. And then he became a talking head on the media, and he wrote a lot of books and that type of thing. So Jim Rogers said, I had a wealthy friend of mine contacted me and said, what business college would you recommend I send my son to? Money is no object. And he said at the time, tuition was a lot less money. He said, I told her, take the $100,000 that you'd spend on sending him through college and give it to him and tell him to start a business. And he'll learn more, whether that business succeeds or fails. He will learn more than he would in going to get an MBA. And I guess that's kind of the advice of these people. If you're getting a marketing degree and you don't know how to market yourself in order to get a job, maybe that wasn't worth anything. And then I look at this and I think, well, this woman, the mother, is actually a pediatrician. So she's probably been marketing vaccines for Pfizer to people as well. Anyway, they want a coach that's going to help them to figure out whether they're going to pursue a college. And one of the other ridiculous extremes of this is one person saying, yeah, I got to get my son focused on this. He's 16 years old and he just wants to run around with his friends and have a good time. He doesn't want to think about what major he should be pursuing and what he's going to do for the rest of his life. He says, that's kind of sad, right? You're dealing with a 16-year-old boy. All he wants to do is just run around with his friends. Yeah, that's kind of what it was like. I went to 4 different colleges, and I had 4 different majors at 3 different colleges. And I guess my career coach was Karen. She got me serious and said, you need to focus on what you're going to do. But so yeah, eventually life catches up to you one way or the other, right? It's going to be somebody in your life, or it's going to be circumstances in your life. And but this is kind of helicopter parenting taken to the final extreme, I guess. It wasn't enough that you shepherded them through all these expensive schools and they get out and they got a worthless degree at the end of all that. They still can't get a job. So now you're going to pay for more help and counseling for these people. Meanwhile, in Germany, not only, I imagine the property taxes there are really high as well, but they are going to block people from even buying a home based on their political views. If you got extremist views, and they will decide what extremist views are, they're not only going to arrest you and threaten you over your speech on social media, but if you get on their list, you're going to be banned from even buying a home. They've been doing this against AFD. They've been banning people who are involved in AFD politics from owning guns, taking away their guns if they had them as hunters. They've been looking at everything they can in this incredibly authoritarian country. By the way, guess what? You would not be banned from buying a home if you were a radical Muslim. Only if you are a conservative that they don't like, a conservative that threatens their job. So municipalities will be granted the right to request information from the Federal Criminal Police Office regarding a potential buyer if there is suspicion of, quote, anti-constitutional activities. In other words, based on your speech, you'll be banned from owning a home. And as a matter of fact, it does not concern potential buyers who have committed a crime. It doesn't include people who are planning to commit a crime. Mere suspicion of anti-constitutional activities is sufficient to keep you from being able to have a home. And again, this is coming from Germany, the place that aggressively criminalizes and comes after parents who homeschool their children. We had an example of that homeschooling family here in Tennessee, not too far from where we live in eastern Tennessee. And the Biden administration, after these people had been here for several years as legitimate refugees, they're Christians who wanted to homeschool their own kids, and the government decided that it was going to take the kids away from them. So they escaped Germany, applied for refugee status, and were granted that and stayed here for quite some time. I think came in during the Obama administration. They were not on welfare. They weren't defrauding people like the Somalis. They were good citizens. And Biden decided that of all the millions of people that he brought into the United States, those are the people that he wanted to get rid of. White Christian homeschoolers. So they worked real hard to get rid of them, but fortunately they failed doing that.
Yes.
But Germany doesn't like them either. Yeah.
Germans are known for being rowdy and lawless, so you got to get rid of them. You want to import, a much better class of people from Africa.
That's right. So this is targeted toward the AFD, which has soared in popularity. The only, again, trying to stop the swamping of the German people by bringing in people from third world countries. And in Ireland, a Canadian-born cop is bringing the kind of punishment that we saw in Canada with the Freedom Convoy. This cop, the top cop in Ireland, is bringing that in. They have come just 1 inch away from declaring martial law. Why? Well, you've got a lot of farmers, truckers, people who cannot afford the diesel fuel. This is a reaction now to what Trump has been doing. But it's beyond that. I mean, it's also the carbon taxes that they've been piling on. This is what Trump is doing is kind of like the last straw. And of course, the Irish government can't do anything about what Trump is doing. Nobody can other than trying to remove this guy. But there was a long buildup to this in terms of carbon taxes and all the rest of this. That's what they're demanding. So they have basically blockaded a lot of different areas in Dublin and some other large cities. Galway, Limerick, and Cork. And so it's very much like the Canadian Freedom Convoy. And so you have Rebel News pointed out that Ezra Levant said Ireland's deputy police commissioner is from Toronto. She's threatening the Irish trucker protests with the same consequences that Trudeau used against the peaceful trucker protests in Canada. Canada is a net exporter of civil liberties violations. Well, the problem is that every government on earth, including our own, is finding ways to track and punish speech that they don't like. This is happening throughout Western civilization, and it is the thing that is going to take Western civilization down and take us into a dark dystopian tyranny. According to the police, the protesters crossed a line when they set up blockades. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's the Trump blockade that is actually, this is reacting to. The level of support we are getting is unbelievable, they said. We want carbon tax to be gone, and we need fuel to be capped at a realistic price. One of our tractors that's in front of me has a gross weight of probably 26 tons with a trailer and a digger on the back. They're not going to move that very easily. Protesters are sleeping in their vehicles, insisting that the government speak with them. Ireland's leaders will have to decide whether to negotiate with increasingly desperate and cash-strapped citizens or to initiate a Trudeau-style crackdown. This is happening everywhere. This is a direct result of this long, slow takedown of the economy. Immigration is a part of it, but so are the green mandates that have happened. They have baked in this kind of economic catastrophe. Trump is there. And understand, this is a global global conspiracy. You know, they're all doing the same things at the same time. And Trump is there to accelerate this. And the solution for these people, quote unquote solution, as Gerald Slinty always says, when the people lose everything, they lose it. And then the government takes us to war. That is their solution. They don't want to, they will fight people domestically, but primarily they want to take us to war.
If I was the Irish government, I'd be starting to get a little concerned. There are still people alive today that remember the IRA, that were members of the IRA. These people went to the mat to get rid of England, and that tyranny was not nearly what they are experiencing now. I can't imagine that this is going to end well.
The thing I like about Ireland is they have really done more than any other country in Western civilization that I know of to keep and maintain their culture. You know, you're seeing that they have gone back and restored their language. Same thing in Wales, but especially in Ireland. And when I go on YouTube, I like Irish folk music, and when I go back and look at it, they're all young people. I mean, you know, just like I was talking about the jazz concert we went to the other day, they're all geezers like me. You know, it's like nobody remembers their culture or their music here in America, but in Ireland they do. You know, they're all really young and keeping this stuff up. So yeah, they work to keep their culture.
I think a part of what helped them do that is that they were not widely connected to the outside world for a long time. Like, they were fairly backwards. And if you are not connected to this global hive mind of the internet everywhere all the time, it's more easy to maintain your national culture when you're not having everyone else's culture thrust upon you, when it's not becoming this odd amalgamation at all times.
Well, I think they're under a lot of persecution from the British as well. And that tends to bring people together, just as we're seeing in Iran. You know, whenever you attack a civilian population, whether it's economically, politically, whether you're dropping bombs on them, what happens? They push back. They join together. There's kind of this camaraderie of the oppressed that happens. And I think that was a big part of Ireland. You know, the harder things got for them with the famines and the political stuff, the more they coalesced together. And of course, the IRA was something that grew out of that. Well, we're going to take a quick break, but before we do, let's read some of the comments here.
That's right. I want to say thank you very much to Stealth Patriot. We really do appreciate the support.
Yes,
he says, Trump should depict himself as Klaus Schwab, complete with Emperor Palpatine / Klingon drag wardrobe.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
It would have to be in gold, though.
It have to be what?
It would have to be all gold, though.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the golden age.
And Patty Wax says $220 a semester, up to 18 hours in Virginia State University in 1970, $1,700 total for room, board, and tuition. Yes, books were the biggest expense.
Yeah, that sounds similar to, I don't remember the exact dollar figures, but that sounds similar to what it was at USF. Yeah.
And we have Timed Non-Tied saying libertarians are in for J.D. Vance and or Tucker Carlson, Joe Kent. None with a freedom track record nor understanding. After supporting Trump, they've lost all principle. They and their philosophy are a danger.
Yes, they are. As a matter of fact, we can see this happening with the Libertarian Party. And I saw this guy who was a California billionaire, and he was letting Eric Swalwell live in his mansion. It's like, oh, you better get this guy out of there. Anyway, he says, I've had it with the Democrat Party. I'm not a Democrat anymore. I'm going to be a libertarian. And I saw that and I thought, well, I can remember when we were doing things in the late 1980s, about 40 years ago. Nobody even knew what libertarian was. You would say that and you'd kind of get this blank stare. Even one of the guys who was running for president in the Libertarian Party, I remember Dick Body was a speaker and, like a motivational speaker. And a lot of times you have people like that who would run for president because they knew that was going to give them some national exposure or something else they can add to their resume. So his dad was a preacher, and he got his dad up there to say something, when he was getting the nomination or trying to get the nomination. He didn't get it. But his dad got up and said, well, I really like this librarian party here. It's like, yeah, I can understand why you'd say that. There's a lot of books out in the lobby that people are reading, a lot of Austrian economics and things like that. But it was the librarian party. And that's the way people look at it. They would think that when I'd say libertarian, they would think I was liberal. And we had to say classical liberal, which, again, that didn't mean anything to them. Liberals stole that term. Liberal used to mean somebody who believed in liberty, economic and political. The left stole that term in the early 20th century as there was a split in that movement because of Woodrow Wilson and his pushing people into war. The economic conservatives went with him because they thought war was going to be good for business. The people who were civil liberties went the other way. So you had this bifurcation, and they took the label with them when they left and called themselves liberals. But it is kind of interesting that people recognize this. But I think where the Libertarian Party lost it was with Gary Johnson, and especially with Weld. I forget what his first name was.
Wasn't it Bill Weld? Weld?
I think so, yeah. He was governor of Massachusetts, and Gary Johnson was governor of New Mexico. And these are two Democrat areas, and both of them won election as Republican governors. And so they put them together on a ticket, and they were not libertarian at all. They were opportunists. And then at the same time, just in case you didn't understand that they were selling out to try to get legitimacy, they got rid of the non-aggression principle, right? Which was something that they would always require that somebody who's going to run for office as a libertarian or something would agree to that. It was kind of like their fundamental core value that you reject the use of force or fraud to achieve social or political goals. When they got rid of that, the party was basically done, and as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, it's really sad. And then you could see in 2020, Joe Jorgensen, who I knew was the presidential nominee, and they were completely ignoring what was happening with the lockdown. I couldn't believe it. It's like, what's the matter with you people? That's how I first interviewed Donald Rainwater that I talked about with the property tax issues, because he was the only libertarian who was running for office that I could see anywhere who was opposing what was happening in terms of the lockdown stuff. And all of a sudden, he went up into double digits when he opposed that. And then I think he got scared he was going to get elected. He backed off. But I interviewed him back in 2020, and I reached out to him at least. I don't know. I think he was afraid to come on because he was experiencing a moment of popularity. That's the thing about libertarians. We would look at it as like, well, okay, I'll run for this because I know I can't get elected. At
least it'll only be 4 months or so of humiliation, and
that's right. You get a chance to talk about it, which back then they were dying to talk about it, but there was no social media or anything like that you could get onto. So that was basically it. If you're running for office or you're part of the political party, you had an opportunity to talk to the press sometimes about what you'd like to see, and you tell them, we want to abolish the income tax and the IRS, and just roll their eyes and walk away. Now you got some Republicans saying it, but they won't do it. You say you will, but you won't, right?
I think a problem with the Libertarian Party is that many of them, in fact, probably a majority of them at this point, are sort of atheist hippies or technocrats that, they don't believe rights come from God because they don't believe there is a God. And if the rights don't come from God, that means they are on some level negotiable. And it becomes I'm going to get it for myself by any means necessary. And if I have to sell out everyone else, that's just the way the game is played.
Well, that's the Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel strain of libertarianism. We need to have a dictator come in and give us liberty. And it's like, that's kind of the most oxymoronic thing I've ever seen in my life. It's not going to be there unless it grows up organically. But that's where they are right now. And when you look at the quote unquote libertarianism of Peter Thiel, it's as phony as is Christianity. When he's going around holding his seminars about the Antichrist and saying that, the Antichrist is going to be the one who wants to block artificial intelligence from us. That is really the true gospel that he's offering people. That's artificial intelligence. So is that all the comments we got?
Yep.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about Trump's big lie of the day. And I think we're going to have to make this a regular feature because every day he's got another whopper that's out there. And it really is, I guess, entertainment. About the only thing we can do is laugh at it. We'll be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
My fellow Americans, today I have the tremendous honor of announcing my lie of the day. This lie is the biggest and most beautiful lie you've ever heard. Believe me.
Mr. President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as the doctor, and it had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better. As an example, the 11,000, I understand your husband's going through treatment.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He's
He
going
has
through
cancer.
some very serious cancer treatment, so
Yes, sir.
this goes a long way.
Yes, sir. It sure does.
We have the best lies. Nobody lies better than me. Tremendous.
Yeah, his lie of the day. Yeah, that was me as a doctor. I'm not a doctor, but I play one in memes. He also plays kings and emperors. But folks, this was obviously in response to the argument he was having with the Pope over the war. And so he invokes a meme that's got some religious symbolism to it, and everybody can see that. Everybody can see that he's lying. Of course, this is not done in response to an argument about his warp speed genetic code injection, where he's out there magically healing people. This is what it looks like. Here he is. He's dressed in a white robe with red, and again, who knows, how Jesus dressed or whatever. But you've got angels in the background flying. Actually, one of them is a demon, right? But you got the eagle flying, got the American flag, and you've got healing coming out of his hands. Rays are emanating out of his hands. And there's a sick person there on the bed. There's a nurse there on the side, not a Red Cross worker, but he's trying to tell everybody that he is actually a doctor. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor. Had to do with Red Cross, as a Red Cross worker was there, and we support the Red Cross. Yeah, I'm all about the Red Cross. And I guess, did Trump never see Fauci? Fauci used to parade around in his white lab coat all the time. As a matter of fact, there was one of these episodes where they came out, and I'll never forget, I played it over and over again, the imagery that was there. I said, look at this. They had 6 people come out in white lab coats, I'm a doctor type of thing, right? And there's a podium in the center of the stage. You got 6 people come out. 3 of them go to the left side of the podium. 3 of them stand on the right side, and they stand there and just stand there and cross their hands in front of their body, right? It's like, what is this about? We're supposed to be impressed because you got a white lab coat now? And then you had whoever the government spokesperson was. I don't know if it was Fauci or Birx or if it was a press secretary or something. They come out and they take the podium. And it's like, see, I've got this army of medical personnel with me to give me credibility. Did Trump never see that? Do you not know that doctors wear white lab coats? They don't dress like that meme there. And have you ever seen a doctor with light beams coming out of his hands? Absolutely not. And yet, and the pushback against this was almost universal, both left and right, Catholic and Protestant, because again, he was arguing with the Pope. That was the context for this, as a matter of fact. That is an important part of this. And so you had evangelicals and Catholics all calling this blasphemous. There was even criticism on WND, the biggest Zionist cheerleaders that you're going to find in the conservative movement of Donald Trump. Even they criticized this. So Trump post appears to depict him as Jesus has been removed amid a backlash, is the headline from the Washington Post. And again, how many times does he have to portray himself as a king? How many times does he have to portray himself as Christ before people have had enough of this stuff? Many people will say it's blasphemous and pure evil, and calling it demonic because of the change that was made before he put it out. This is a meme that was done going back to February the 4th of this year. And it was done with all of the symbolism that was, again, this is pretty close to the original that was done on February the 4th. What was changed was that central figure at the top that has wings, and we'll show you where that really came from. And that truly is a demonic symbol that they co-opted for this. But I got to say, when I look at this, the intention of the person who put it out, he said, Trump is somebody, in February 4th, he said, Trump is someone who is healing our nation. No, he is not. He was killing people in 2020 with medical stuff, and he hasn't healed our nation at all. He's been the great divider. He's been setting us at each other's throats. He's created this federalized ICE. They deliberately want to get in people's faces. They deliberately want to rough people up. That's what Stephen Miller wants. He's pushing for division. He's pushing for civil war. He's not a uniter. And I got to say that I object to the quasi-religious aspects of this, because this is what I don't like about Christian nationalism. And I haven't seen a single person say that. We do not want to worship the state. That was another thing that used to be in the Libertarian Party. We reject the cult of the omnipotent state. And I still reject the cult of the omnipotent state. And that's one aspect of this Christian nationalism that people like Trump and Pete Hegseth are selling us. It is the worship of the state. And it is kind of interesting, I think, that a lot of these same people worship the state of Israel. The state of Israel is not Israel. It's not the Israel of the Bible. And the Israel of the Bible are the people, whatever their ethnic background, the people who follow God, who trust God, who believe God and who follow his Messiah. Those are the children of God. That is the actual Israel. Israel was a picture of that greater reality. But to sully all of this stuff with their Christian nationalism, I think is one of the most disgusting things about this. I mean, people can look at Trump as a religious Jesus figure, whatever. That really kind of follows the bigger approach, which nobody talks about, is that really kind of follows from this kind of Christian nationalism, which makes worship of the state their religion. That's the bigger picture that's there. Anyway, the other issue, the winged three-horned demon above Trump's head. Well, that was from a different version than the February the 4th version. And that was the only change from that February the 4th version was the other one. Here's the original versus the Trump version side by side. And you can see that they're exactly the same, except for that central figure is not a soldier, but it is some kind of a winged being with three horns on it. Where did that come from? Well, if you look at it, it came from this cover of this book, which came out a few years ago. This was a apocalyptic novel, and the guy that's there walking by himself in kind of a robe is a quasi-Jesus figure who goes to a renamed Tel Aviv, and he fights with Baal. And so what that is a picture of from that book, and it looks exactly like the picture that they put in the meme, that was a depiction of Baal, of Satan. There he is right there. I think that is really what's going on. Of course, I think the best version of this is this one right here, where they got Jeffrey Epstein there, and of course the nurse is now Melania, and you got Ghislaine Maxwell there on the side. The American flag has been replaced with the Israeli flag and all the rest of the stuff. Excuse me. We've even got Benjamin Netanyahu over there on the right. I don't know who that is on the left. Maybe that's another Israeli figure that I don't recognize. I do recognize Benjamin Netanyahu on the right. And they've also got the wall there, which is not in the original one. Yeah, they replaced the picture of the Statue of Liberty, and some federal building with the Greek columns has been replaced by the Jerusalem wall that is there. And so that really is the more accurate version of this. But then the back and forth. You got an apologist, the Reverend Jordan Wells, who is founder of Christians Against Anti-Zionism Institute. Well, of course, he's going to be a Judaizer. He said, Jesus' disciples healed the sick in his name, and with Christ in us, we can do his works too. Well, there you go. The problem is that Trump is not a disciple. He's made that pretty clear. He's pretty much said it himself. He famously said, well, I don't need any forgiveness. I just try to do better each time. That is not the Christian approach. Christian approach is that we all need forgiveness, that none of us can earn our way. And that was what Ben Sass was talking about. And so, yeah, Trump is not a disciple. As a matter of fact, these people who are apologists for him, like this guy who is more concerned about Israel than he is about Christ, he needs to do Trump a favor. And he needs to tell him the good news about Christ. But these people don't do it. That's why I say Christian nationalism, not just Christian nationalism, but Christian Zionism is an oxymoron. Because the people who are so focused on Zionism, that's all they can see. They're not followers of Christ. Most of them will say things like Paul White said, well, we don't need to worry about the Jews. I mean, they are descended from Abraham, so we don't need to give them the gospel. Well, you're not Christian then. You're just Zionist. Anyway, he says he's been crystal clear from the beginning. He believes that he's doing the work that God has set before him. Give me a break. Genocide, war, kind of perversion that he's involved in, corruption, that's coming from God. You make God an author of sin when you do that. He is trying to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse all by himself. He's given us the plagues in his first go around, and now he's given us war and famine this time around. He's also really the one-man fourth turning, if you look at what he's doing. Global depression, global war. And then you have Todd Starnes, who comes in with the whataboutism. He said, I know everybody is hyperventilating about the meme that Trump shared. Well, context matters, and I'm not going to speak for the president, but let's review the deification of Barack Hussein Obama. Sorry, Todd, you're just toady. That is not the context. The context was that he was arguing with the Pope, and he's going to say, I'm bigger than the Pope. I'm holier than the Pope, or whatever, which is, so he makes himself up as Jesus, which offends both Catholics and evangelicals. That's the real context. Todd Starnes is going to say, well, people worship Barack Obama, so now we can worship Trump. And I said that about Barack Obama. I thought that was really scary when I saw the Democrats doing that. They were not nearly as bad as Republicans have been, not nearly as bad as Todd Starnes, for example, when he's going to say something like this. So he said, Democrats literally called him Chicago Jesus. Well, I don't know, they built golden statues for him and carried them around, but that's really where we are with the Republicans. And I think it's pathetic. I think it's pathetic what they did with Obama. And I think it's pathetic what they're doing even more so with Trump. As I said before, when you're talking about corruption because Biden did something or because Obama did something, that doesn't make it now legal for everybody to do that. It's still wrong. It's still a crime. So he was attacking. This is the context, Todd Starnes. He said Pope Leo is weak on crime. He's terrible on foreign policy because he said we should be peacemakers, not starting wars of aggression. Trump said he talks about fear of the Trump administration, but doesn't mention the fear that the Catholic Church and all other Christian organizations had during COVID when they were arresting priests, ministers, and everybody else for holding church services, even when going outside and being 10 and even 20 feet apart. I look at this, I see Trump bragging about how he shut down churches. Remember that at the height of this stuff, as they started rolling back some of the rules initially, you had some of the casinos in Vegas opened up. And so you had some Christians who went into they still wouldn't open up the churches because you had the CDC had a list of the most dangerous places that you go. And guess what? The most dangerous place that you can go was church. And they say, well, it's because people go to church and they're singing. And so, you're spreading germs around and all the rest of this kind of stuff. They would not let them hold a church service, even when they went into a casino that was otherwise open. It was Trump that pushed that fear. And yes, the people who were afraid and the people who shut it down, the church institutions, the Catholic as well as evangelical, they should be blamed for that. It was fear, which is the opposite of faith. They ended their faith in Christ out of their fear at that point in time. And when people saw how faithless they were, it's one of the reasons why church attendance plummeted and has stayed low ever since. But he's boasting about this campaign of fear that he paid people to engage in. And so he's taunting the churches here for believing his COVID lies and becoming afraid of it. He says, I'm doing exactly what I was elected in a landslide to do. Well, no, you weren't. You were not elected to be concerned solely with foreign policy. You were not elected to go to war economically with the world. You were not elected to go to war literally with the world, which is what you're doing right now. All these people say, I voted for this. No, you didn't. He said he was going to do exactly the opposite. He said he was going to focus on economics. He was going to lower taxes, not raise them, but he raised taxes with tariffs. He started wars that he said he wasn't going to start. He was, whatever he won, whether it was a landslide or not, he was elected to do exactly the opposite of what he is doing now. Exactly the opposite. So again, what he took exception to was the Pope quoting, "Blessed are the peacemakers." He doesn't like that. That is what Christ said. And what did Christ say after that? He said, because they will be called the children of God. Not people who have some ethnic descendancy from Abraham, even if they have that, which they claim that is their right for their for their state, and yet they scrupulously avoid having a genetic testing to prove that.
This is one of those parts of the Bible that up until this point, I think, has been fairly non-controversial. You know, most people go, oh, blessed are the peacemakers. Yeah, that makes sense.
But not for a warmonger like Trump. Yeah, blessed
there are parts
the
of the
warmongers.
Bible I understand people, having problems with the gospel.
That's
I need a savior. I'm incapable of saving myself. That's hard to hear. You don't want to accept that. But having him go, blessed are the peacemakers, you go, yeah, that makes sense. We don't want a constant state of violence.
Unless you're Trump.
Yeah.
In which case, it's blessed are the warmongers, for they shall be paid by Israel. That's the way he rewrites this. So again, major backlash from everybody. One person said, I don't know. This is Megan Basham. I don't know who she is. I say she's a prominent conservative Protestant Christian writer. Anyway, she said, I don't know if the president thought he was being funny or if he's under the influence of some substance, which, by the way, that also came out. That was that's something that the Trump administration was very well known for in the first go-around was speed and other things like that. Or what possible explanation could he have for this outrageous, she puts that in all uppercase, blasphemy? But he needs to take this down immediately and ask for forgiveness from the American people and then from God. No, Trump never apologizes. Trump never asks for forgiveness. And he told us that when he was a candidate back in 2015. So again, he lied about everything in order to get office, and he's going to continue to lie about everything as well. His most loyal MAGA supporters have cast him in quasi-messianic terms over and over again, repeatedly. Same way that he casts himself repeatedly as a dictator, as a king. And again, the Post is, said one person, let's see, who is this? This is Isabel Brown, a Catholic podcaster who I don't know. She said the Post is frankly disgusting and unacceptable, but also a profound misreading of the American people, experiencing a true and beautiful revival of faith in Christ in the midst of our broken culture. Well, I'm not so sure about that, the revival aspect of this. Michael Knowles, another conservative Catholic podcaster aligned with Trump, said online, it, quote, behooves the president, both spiritually and politically, to delete the picture, no matter the intent. Well, he did. Riley Gaines, the conservative podcaster, former collegiate swimmer, and big ally of the president, said, I can't understand why he would post this. Is he looking for a response? Does he actually think this? Either way, two things are true. She said a little humility would serve him well. Well, there's not a chance of that happening. That would have to be a complete remake of his character. I mean, God could do that to him. God could humble him. But I haven't seen that happen yet. And she said, and also true, God will not be mocked. And it really is a mockery. That's what they mean by blasphemy. And of course, there's Paula White, his spiritual advisor, who remains silent. He should have said, since he's in a robe and he's got, light coming out of his hands and everything, he should have said, I'm not trying to make myself Jesus. I'm trying to make myself Paula White. That would have explained it right there.
I thought maybe you were going to say a Jedi or something like that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
No, I was Qui-Gon Jinn the entire time.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. The Trump as healing Epstein with all of his Zionist friends around him, I think, is the best take on that thing. So it was a non sequitur. It was, if you don't understand the context, that he was taking exception to the fact that the Pope was pointing out that he's a warmonger, not a peacemaker. The Pope previously criticized the U.S.-Israeli attack against Iran, described Trump's threats to destroy Iranian civilization as, quote, truly unacceptable. That's putting it kind of mild. Everybody else says it's a war crime. It's a threat of genocide to target civilians. It is the very definition of terrorism. He said it's a threat against an entire people. Absolutely right. Trump said, we don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon, he said. Not a fan of Pope Leo, he said. No, he's only a fan of Israel, who has nuclear weapons. And you got people like Mark Levin and Pollard, the spy, pushing for Israel and for the U.S. to use nuclear weapons against Iran. But again, it's the Trump Epstein that is here, and that version of it, they do keep the Trump bail figure that is there, and you can see that difference there between the first one and the second one. Marjorie Taylor Greene said it is more than blasphemy. She said it is an antichrist spirit. And why would somebody change? Because that's a pretty small part of the meme there. Why would somebody change that? That's a question. And why would they change it to look so exactly like the book cover here, where this is a depiction of Baal? That is another question. But to me, even the original smacks of Christian nationalism, which is an oxymoron. So one person, Brillin Hollyhand, said, faith is not a prop. Well, you better tell that to Paula White, to Robert Jeffress. It is a prop for them. And then Trump uses them as a prop as well. This is something's been going on for quite some time. Well, CNN's Dana Bash, the left looked at this, and they were, of course, also offended because of Trump, not because of the religious iconography that's there. But Dana Bash on CNN said, I'm not Christian, but I can see that that's Jesus. Well, we'll just say, we don't know what Jesus looks like, but we're talking about the way that Jesus is depicted, So 1 week apart, you got Trump bringing in Laura Ingraham and showing her that he's got a picture of what is commonly portrayed as Jesus. He's got a picture on the wall, but he's got it behind a curtain. So he pulls back the curtain to show his closet Jesus to her, which isn't Jesus at all. Anyway, said, and look at the hands. I got some kind of healing powers in them. I don't know. I mean, there's some incredible doctors, but I don't know any that have healing magical powers in their hands or have religious powers. Said Kristen Holmes when she was talking to her. Whoopi Goldberg and The View couldn't stand the view of this meme. Whoopi Goldberg said, I can't even look at it. I sympathize with that. I'm getting so sick and tired of Trump, I can't stand listening to him or seeing him either. She said, this is not a shock. It shouldn't be shocking to anybody. He has said and done things that make your jaw drop. You know who he is. I know. Let's not kid each other. We know who he is. We know what he stands for. And we know what he believes, what you all believe, right? He believes that you don't care, she said. And that's true. So again, he goes in and deletes it. I guess the question is, why delete something if he's actually portraying himself as a doctor? Doesn't he want to play a doctor on social media? But he got tremendous amount of pushback on this. Again, I think the untold story that people are not paying attention to is the worship of the state that is in the original that is there. That is a state religion. And as I've said for the longest time, when you look at Christian nationalism, be very careful. When you start combining politics with religion, what you wind up with is politics destroying the religion. That's what I'm concerned about, and that's what I see is this kind of worship of this. So there's an article from Mediaite, the Mount Rushmore of his most jaw-dropping religious moments. They talk about when he was running as a candidate back in 2015, he was asked, what's your favorite Bible verse? Oh, I like all of them. It'd be hard to pick one. You can't think of a single one. Again, maintaining the illusion of having one when we all know that he doesn't have one. This is what has been characteristic of Trump. He'll lie to your face. He knows that he's lying. We know that he's lying. He knows that we know that he's lying, but he does it anyway. And so then the follow-up question, well, are you an Old Testament or New Testament guy? Well, I like them both equally type of thing. So again, he sells his $60 God Bless the USA Bibles. He gets a King James version that doesn't have any copyright charges to it, charges $60 for it, throws in other things that he didn't write, and like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Pledge of Allegiance. things that he didn't author, things that he also hasn't read, like the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, just like he hasn't read the Bible. So here's a book of a lot of stuff that Donald Trump has never read and never will read. And even if he did read it, he wouldn't follow the Constitution. He wouldn't follow Christ. He wouldn't follow the Bible. So that's kind of a collection. I guess that's one reason to buy it. We can start a whole library of things that Trump has not read and Trump never intends to read and Trump never intends to follow, even though he pretends that he does.
You could fill a library, like you said, with books he hasn't read. In fact, they already have. It's called the library. Yeah,
it's called the Trump Presidential Library. So anyway, he urged the GOP. This is one I missed, actually, to pass the voter ID bill. He said, do it for Jesus. Just a few weeks ago, Trump invoked Jesus in an effort to convince Congress to pass the comprehensive voter ID bill known as the Save America Act. He said, don't worry about Easter going home. In fact, make this one for Jesus, okay? Make this for Jesus. That'd be a damn good thing. Just amazing. And so again, going back to Frank Luntz when he was running in 2015, he asked him if he'd ever asked God for forgiveness for his actions. He says, I'm not sure I have. I just go on and try to do better from there. I don't think so. I think if I do something wrong, I think I just try and make it right. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't. And so again, he doesn't even think about God. God's not even in his mind. And he will never admit that he's wrong. He'll never admit that he's made a mistake. He's never going to ask for forgiveness for anything. He'll lead us into global depression, world war. He will create a fake pandemic and pay governors of every party to lock down their people, bribe them massively to destroy this country, destroy the middle class, Main Street businesses, while Wall Street gets a pass on all this stuff. He will murder children with this mRNA vaccine, and he will never ask for forgiveness. And he will always have people like Todd Starnes and other nominal Christians who will give him a pass and make excuses for what he does. This is an article from Frank Bruni, Pete Hegseth's Gospel of Carnage. Yeah, well, gospel is means good news, and there isn't any good news in what Pete Hegseth is telling people. He says, I guess since he's a zealot by nature, he can't hide it. Pete Hegseth has made it clear that every missile that the U.S. fires, every bomb it drops, every Iranian that it kills is for Jesus. Praise be to the Lord who has given America the power to wipe out an entire civilization. And I find this to be the real blasphemy, folks. More than a meme, I am disgusted with Pete Hegseth and what he is saying. And of course, Trump is a part of that. He exalts over destruction. That is the most un-Christian thing. So again, this is the context for which this nonsense came out. And this is really the context of this original meme showing Trump out there. That this is the Christian nationalism, the phony worship of the state that is at the heart of this and everything that Pete Hegseth does. And so in a social post, Pope Leo said, God does not bless any conflict. Anyone who's a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once wielded the sword but today drop bombs. Well, I disagree with that. I do believe that there is a just war, justification for the defense of innocent life, just like there is in a one-on-one situation. You got somebody who breaks into your church and starts shooting people. You have not only a right, but you also have a duty to stop that person with lethal force if necessary. And that's what makes a war justified or unjust. First of all, you are not the aggressor. If you are the aggressor, that is never justified. But a war that is fought in defense of innocent life, a war that is fought in defense of innocent life and specifically avoids targeting civilians. And the goal of that war is to stop the aggressor. That's the only case in which it is justified. And it's not only justified, but it is required for Christians to do that. And so I disagree with him on that. I'm not against every war. I'm not a pacifist, but I'm against any war of aggression. The aggressors need to be stopped. That is the purpose of the war, to stop that aggression. It's just that simple. And so Trump always makes everything about himself. He actually said this. He said, if I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican. I don't know how those two things are connected at all. He thinks that they put in somebody that he regards as a liberal in order to counteract him. It's just crazy. He said he's one of those who wanted churchgoers and clerics to be arrested, he said. Well, he was paying people to do that, bribing people to do that. And so, again, as a lot of people said, what are these guys smoking? Well, we've got an answer, because we've had several people from the previous Trump administration have talked to reporters and given them a story about the massive use of controlled substances during the first Trump administration, people taking stimulants and speed, primarily something that's called modafinil, and that military pilots have used for decades to stay up. Basically, it's kind of speed that's there. And so they said it was kind of like the Wild West. Whatever somebody needed, we were able to go fill it. These are the same people, folks, that, whatever they need, they can get any drug they need, whether it's something that fighter pilots have used, or if it's something more serious, they can go get it, right? And yet, what are they doing down in Venezuela? If they suspect somebody is trafficking in drugs, they just execute them. And then if that initial missile thing leaves them shipwrecked, they circle back around and finish the job, like the war criminals that they are. These people who are pushing the war on drugs, these people say, we got to take over Venezuela because of the drug war. They're out there snorting coke and taking speed and all the rest of the stuff. That is the hypocrisy of the Trump administration. And then for all these evangelicals who are supporting Trump, I have to say the Trump administration is now agreeing to return the pride flag to New York's Stonewall Monument. He has gone back on this. They made a big issue of taking down the rainbow flag that was there in this park. Now they're putting it back up, just like they made a big issue about stopping the funding to Planned Parenthood, then quietly restored the funding to Planned Parenthood. Do you understand what a liar, what a hypocrite, what a traitor and turncoat Donald Trump is? Whether you're talking about wars or the economy, or you're talking about these social issues, everything he says is a lie. And so we'll have to take a look at what we do on a daily basis here. It's going to be kind of difficult to pick what the lie of the day is going to be. Maybe we should make this a regular feature. Then we have, when we're talking about this, we have a pro-gay Christian event that is going to be scheduled at Baylor University to counteract TPUSA, Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization. And this is an event featuring pro-gay Christians that has been scheduled to serve as an alternative event to Turning Point USA at Baylor University. Scheduled speakers include Kelly Robinson, who identifies as a Catholic and is the first Black lesbian to serve as the president of the LGBT activist group, the Human Rights Campaign. And she is in a same-sex marriage. Another planned speaker is Greg Garrett, a Baylor professor and a columnist for Baptist News Global, who made headlines last year for his public affirmation of homosexuality and transgenderism. And so you look at this and you say, wow, this is Charlie Kirk's event and his organization's event. And they're pushing this to counteract what TPUSA is doing. And yet the reality is that's exactly what Charlie Kirk did. And I had a big argument with a long-term friend over this. They were big supporters of Charlie Kirk. This guy is one of the best Christian speakers I've seen. I said, have you seen what he did with his Culture War Roadshow? He did exactly what these people at Baylor University are doing. counteracting it. He made he's a big tent Republican. That's what Charlie Kirk was. I don't know if he finished up that way. Maybe he changed. Maybe he matured as a Christian. But at that point in time, when I saw him, I just saw that this is just about getting as many people into your big tent of Republicanism and getting as many people as you can into your organization, getting as much of a head count, as much money as you can, and you'll embrace anything. To say that he's going to fight the culture war, and then he holds a joint event with a guy who, just like they brought in a scheduled speaker who's a first black lesbian, and is in a same-sex marriage, he did the same thing, except it was a black male who was homosexual. And he's virtue signaling about that. And he fights with the people that are there. When they criticize that, when they said, how does this help us to win the culture war? He says, well, we don't want a theocracy. And it's like, we're not talking about a theocracy. We're talking about a culture war, which you evidently don't understand is a spiritual war. And so this is the clip in question.
As the guy before has said, you've advocated for homosexuality, said that there's a place for the gay agenda within the conservative movement. My question is, and you're also comfortable with transgenders and cross-dressers, I understand. So my question is there...
And Charlie doesn't deny that.
Any point where conservatives should take a moral stance on Christian morality, or should we abandon it altogether? So in other words, what is what is your brand of conservatism doing to actually conserve Christian morality? If we're ceding to the left on transgender, gay rights, gay marriage, we don't want that in conservatism.
So you don't want him in the conservative movement?
So he makes it personal.
Very clear. Let's just be...
That's not personal.
So you don't want me in the...
He's playing the same game the left does. So you hate this guy next to me. No, they don't hate him.
Very clear. Hold on a sec. You're bringing some very charged language. I'm going to try to calm down the temperature in the room so I can try to rationally understand an irrational position.
Try to rationalize away what Christ said.
Let me finish. So, I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible is the greatest book ever to exist in the history of the world. And I believe
it's a great book.
Has decency and dignity as an individual in the United States of America. Hold on a second. We're not a theocracy. We never have been.
And you know what? And wait a minute. Let me hop in here. Hold on, because I'm in it. He's addressing me. The thing that I don't understand. Well, I'm addressing you. How about that?
You don't even have the courage to address the gay man on stage.
So the problem that I have with as somebody that is a gay Christian, and this is the problem that I have. Because my relationship with God and coming back into the church over the past year and a half is one of the greatest gifts that has been given to me in terms of being in this movement. So my question to everybody who tries to say that, oh, you shouldn't be, Christian because you're gay. Why are you trying to turn people away from God? So if you love God...
Why are you trying to turn people away from God?
Oh, right, because I do love God. So why would you be trying to turn me away? Why would you be trying to turn me away from God?
So we're going to get to
another thing, and one thing that I don't do,
question.
And one thing that I don't do is that there is no man that is of this earth that is going to tell me what God has for me and how much God loves me. So,
and he's not going to look at the Bible that says that either. See, here's the issue. None of us are going to stand before God because we are perfect, right? And so when you point that out, that is a loving thing. It is a loving thing to show somebody their need of Christ, their need of forgiveness. And it's also a loving thing to show somebody how they can have a closer walk with Christ. If we're going to say when Christ defines marriage, when he defines sexuality, and he does, when he defines that and we say, well, I don't really care what you have to say. I'm going to call myself a Christian even if I don't follow you. When we do that, we're putting a barrier between ourselves and Christ. That's not a loving thing to leave somebody there. But Charlie Kirk tries to portray these people. He basically called them cowards, called them hateful, when you look at what he was having to say, for pointing this out. And then said, well, we're talking about politics. In other words, politics was the key thing for him in this particular issue here. And again, I don't know if Charlie changed. I hope he did. But politics was a thing that was of primary importance to him. And that was not what these people were talking about. They were talking about culture. And that's what Charlie Kirk was trying to make it about. He had the sign behind him. that says culture war. The culture war, folks, is a spiritual war. And in a spiritual war, we're always going to be told, well, doesn't the Bible say this? Doesn't the Bible say that? We're always got wiggle room to do whatever we want, right? That is not the attitude that gets us in a close walk with Christ. And that should be the goal of Christians. We're not going to be saved because we're heterosexual. We're not going to be saved because we're not homosexual. We're going to be saved because we follow Christ. Saved because of what Christ has done. And we want to have a closer walk with Christ. That's the point of the obedience. None of us can earn our salvation, but we can have a closer walk with Christ. And it is a thing that is destroying our civilization. The fact that we profess to be followers of Christ, but we aren't. And the fruit of that, we can see that happening in our homes, in our family, in our culture. And when you look at the war on the culture and you look at how this country is going down the drain, it is because we've decided that we are going to take an a la carte approach to the Lord Jesus Christ. I'll pick and choose what I want to follow. And as Christians, we need to do exactly the opposite of that. And it is a loving thing, not a hateful thing. And it's not a cowardly thing. It's difficult to tell that to somebody that doesn't want to hear it. And, they're going to come, don't judge me. It's like, I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you what the Bible says. And they don't want to hear it. Charlie didn't want to hear it. That's the reality. He cares so much about politics that he's willing to put Christ second. That's the thing that concerns me. It's what a religious icon he has become. And I hope that he changed from that. He did say a lot of good things, and I don't criticize him for that. I just have to say, always just understand where TPUSA was even before Erica took over. And just beware of his influence. Don't follow Charlie Kirk. Follow the Lord Jesus Christ. And that means following what he has to say, even if it's something that you don't like, even if it's something that is going to make your politics or your organization smaller. That's what you need to be following. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will...
do have some comments, so we'd like to get to those first.
Yeah.
We have DG8. It says, David, unfortunately, I'm blown away at people making excuses for this blasphemy from Trump. They believe him when he says the picture is him being a doctor. MAGA media is lost. They are buying it. Mm-hmm. I disagree that they're buying it. I think they know what the truth is, and they are simply covering for it because they'll say anything to keep the dollars rolling in.
I agree. That's the way I see it as well.
A lot of people made more money than they ever thought possible, and they don't want the gravy train to run out.
Yep.
And DG8, thank you again, says, David, is this 4D chess to upset 77 million Catholics? How is that going to affect the midterms? I can't believe MAGA is stupid enough to embrace this idiocracy. Trump is a Democrat operative.
Yeah, it is. They do want to change it back and forth because that helps them to accelerate this. I agree.
It's a ratcheting effect.
Mm-hmm.
Radis Bro, thank you very, very much. We really do appreciate it. He says they will tell us about the drug use, but not all the pharma pills 90% of Congress is on.
Yeah.
Now, you've mentioned that article many times, and I've never been able to go back and find it, but the DC pharmacist that filled all the prescriptions for Congress talking about you would not believe the things these people are all on. These guys are basically walking zombies, and the only thing keeping them upright is pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, Matt Drudge featured that at one point in time, and it was a very, very long article, and buried way in the article was a comment. They've got their own little pharmacy. Think about that. Congress has got its own pharmacy that dispenses drugs to them and protects their privacy while they demand that you have no privacy. And the takeaway quote from the guy who was running this pharmacy said, I can't believe, in terms of the drugs that these people are taking, how do they even get here to the Capitol? I mean, it was so bad. But it was an interesting article, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. But again, I can't find it. Of course, because as you said, I'm trying to look for that, part of the article. But whatever the article was about, I've forgotten. That's the only part of it that stuck with me.
They really buried the lead.
Yeah.
Drudge pulled that out, and I read the whole thing till I found it. But they really buried it in that article. I think it's from the Washington Post, maybe. But
I think you're right. Washington Post, Washington Examiner, one of those two. I forget. But those are the comments we have, so we are now free to go to break.
Yeah, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take a quick look at this other big lie of Trump's, and that is his lawsuit over the Epstein birthday card. Does it constitute defamation? This was just shut down by a judge, and we're going to take a look as to why and what constitutes that. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
If you like the Eagles,
On a dark desert highway,
the Cars, and Huey Lewis in the News,
they say the heart of rock and roll is still beating.
you'll love the Classic Hits channel at APS Radio. Download our app or listen now at apsradio.com.
All right, welcome back. Well, a judge has thrown out Trump's $10 billion lawsuit, defamation lawsuit against Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch that owns the Wall Street Journal. My take on this is what took so long. I understand it takes a long time to get things heard in courts, and perhaps that is, but he basically threw it out right away. The federal judge in Florida dismissed Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal, which claimed that the newspaper defamed Trump with a story saying that the president had sent a bawdy 50th birthday letter. Yeah, it was a body. It was a profile of a female body, but they spelled it as B-A-W-D-Y, to notorious sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. This is the card in question. Now, they described this card, and then a couple of months later, you had some Democrats in Congress actually release the card, and you could see that the description that they had was exactly accurate. He said they had dismissed a civil complaint because Trump, who has adamantly denied sending the letter to his then friend Epstein in 2003, had, quote, not plausibly alleged that the defendants published the article with actual malice. And so the legal issues here, there's a couple of things. First of all, it has to show malice. And they, in their article, they pointed out that Trump had denied it. They described it accurately. And so it was reporting, it wasn't malice. But the other aspect of this is that if it's true, it is also not legally defamation. So this is defamatory, no doubt about it. When you see Trump talking about this and their secrets that they have and all the rest of this in this birthday card here, that is defamatory. It portrays Trump in a negative light, but it is true at the same time, then it is not illegally defamatory, legally defamatory, I say. So you can't sue somebody for telling the truth about you, even if it even if the truth shows you in a negative light. But then the other aspect of this was malice. And so the judge said, well, this comes nowhere close to the standard for showing that the newspaper deliberately avoided investigating the truth of the statements it published about the letter. The article explains that before running the story, defendants contacted Trump, the Department of Justice officials, and the FBI for comment. He also noted that the article included the fact that Trump denied writing the letter, which makes an allegation of actual malice less plausible. But the judge, in giving Trump a second chance in the case, pointed to another precedent that says that a plaintiff should, quote, have the opportunity to amend his complaint if a lawsuit was tossed out for failing to plead facts in a suit giving rise to the inference of actual malice. So I still don't think he's got a leg to stand on. And I thought one of the most interesting things about this, besides the fact that this birthday card that he sent to Jeffrey Epstein was, Ghislaine Maxwell wanted all of his friends to send him a special note. So he had Woody Allen and all these other people and Donald Trump, part of his gang that's hanging around with him. This debauched gang that does this stuff. That was interesting. The secret stuff was, but it was also interesting, I thought, that even, when Trump said, they just made this stuff up. And then when the actual card was released, he sticks to that. Again, it's what we're talking about his lying. He doesn't care if you know that he's lying, and he knows that you know that he's lying, but he's going to continue down that path anyway, even to the extent of continuing his $10 billion lawsuit after that was released. Again, there was a period of about 2 months. It was the middle of July that the Wall Street Journal article came out, and then it was the first week of September that the actual card itself came out to show that it was accurately described. And yet he continues down this path. It's just like his ego politics and his war that is going on right now. He's going to continue down that path regardless of what happens. And again, the letter concludes, happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. Yeah, folks, this is defamation, but it's also definition of both Jeffrey Epstein and his best friend, Donald Trump. It defines their character, or maybe we should say their lack of character. Meanwhile, the New American wrote an extended article about the New York Times expose of Netanyahu and how he got Trump to push on this war. This is something that Bibi has been working on for about 45 years. We went back about 30, 35 years for him saying, they're just a week away from getting nuclear weapons and we got to stop them. And he's got his comic book charts up behind him about how any day now they're going to have a nuclear weapon. And yet Bibi has been working on this for a very, very long time.
Why do you think, Colonel?
Wait, that's the wrong one. Let's go with this.
When I first met Benjamin Netanyahu, he was an opposition MP. He was out of power. It was the early 2000s. He was described by my host, Bicom, as an extremist. And the first thing he told me, and the first thing he would tell everyone, is we've got to bomb Iran. And Iran is, to use his words, the mothership, and Hezbollah and Hamas are its aircraft carriers. And so this has been a project of Netanyahu's that stretches all the way back to then and beyond. He said over the weekend that he has been waiting for this moment for 40 years in an address to the Israeli people. And there's no doubt that he wants to expand the war aims from something that is really pretty focused, which is disabling Iran's nuclear sites.
That's just an excuse.
Much bigger, which is a complete destruction of Iran's oil infrastructure, its hospital system, Tehran itself, all of these now, and regime change.
And of course, we can all see that as well. Everybody knew that, for decades and decades, as he kept telling us this story, that it was just a couple of weeks there away from having a nuclear weapon. And after he'd cried wolf 5 or 6 times over many decades, it became one of these things like the climate alarmist. He was the Iran alarmist. But his real goal was to destroy the Middle East. They want to Gaza-cide the entire Middle East. They want to destroy the infrastructure and the economies and the people of all of these Middle Eastern countries so that they can take them over. That is really what Zionism is about. As the New American writes, Netanyahu hornswoggled President Trump into attacking Iran. That's an interesting word. Hornswoggled. I like that.
Did Yosemite Sam write this article?
Maybe the same guy that gave him that Acme bomb that he used at the UN, his presentation about the Iran bomb. And of course, as the New York Times recounts this, and I said there's a couple of interesting things about this. Number one, when you look at the very few people that were there at the meeting, this meeting is described in great detail, as if it's one of these few people. I mean, we're only talking about Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Susie Wiles, Marco Rubio. You had Netanyahu on one side of the table, and then behind him was the chief of Mossad, who had a dog and pony show that he had set up to propagandize Trump. That's basically it. So who is it that is pushing back against this? J.D. Vance was out of the country and didn't come until later. At a later meeting, this had all been passed on to the intelligence community, and you had Ratcliffe, who's head of the CIA, comes in and he says, well, this is, one word, this is farcical, what you have been told by Netanyahu and Mossad. But I think that, when you look at the consequences of this, and it's going to be gigantic, long-term consequences, this is a career ender for all these people that are a part of this. They want to get this behind them. They want to project this onto Netanyahu in the same way that the vaccine stuff was projected onto Fauci to protect them. It's not to say that Netanyahu and Fauci are not guilty. Yeah, they're criminals, absolutely criminals. And we know that they have pushed this for decades. Fauci is pushing this kind of stuff. He was there with the very first germ game, Dark Winter, in 2001, 2 months before 9/11. He's been pushing for the vaccine industry. He pushed through the legal immunity for the childhood vaccines back in 1986, one of the first things that he did. So you got these guys who have been long-term career criminals like Fauci and Netanyahu, and these people who joined with them and who did, join fully with them, now want to distance themselves from it and say, no, the whole vaccine thing, that was Fauci, and the Iran war thing, that was Netanyahu. This is to protect themselves because they fully know what is happening with this and what is going to happen with this. And they're not pulling back even at this moment. And so in the Situation Room on February 11th, Netanyahu made a hard sell, suggesting Iran was ripe for regime change, expressing the belief that a joint U.S.-Israeli mission could finally bring an end to the Islamic Republic, which, again, was his goal for 40-plus years. And not just the end of the Islamic Republic. He wants the end of all these states in the Middle East. He wants a greater war. He wants to kill everyone who's there. That's the reality of it. And he presents this Goldilocks war, this Goldilocks revolution, where everything is going to be just right. And he was one who was pushing back as well against the idea that Strait of Hormuz would be involved. No, it's not going to happen at all. All the stuff you heard from Donald Trump, what they're telling us now, these are all talking points that Trump had bought into and repeated. And so when you look at who the real war criminals are, the question is it Bibi that is controlling Trump, or is Trump doing what he wants?
Israel and the United States will drive the entire world to crisis economically. Of course, everything will change because of this, depending on how long the madness goes on. The madness is the madness of the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel, two people who have led the world into disaster, two people who are megalomaniacs. They sit atop of powerful military machines. They have basically unchecked authority right now because of a brain-dead Congress and because of Israel's system to do what they want. And they have perhaps launched World War III, the two of them in tandem. We're often asking these days, is the United States fighting Israel's wars? It's not like that. The United States and Israel together are causing this madness. It's not Israel pulling the United States into this. It is a mad United States and a mad Israel, which is pulling the entire world to catastrophe. And as long as these megalomaniacs are given the free rein, they will escalate. They will cause more mass murder, which they're already doing. They are carpet bombing Tehran. That means innocents dying by the hundreds, by the thousands, just like we watched in Gaza. These are people without scruples, without concern about life lost.
Exactly. And, the question is, what is Trump's role in all of this? Well, it's kind of like prostitution, isn't it? Where Trump is the prostitute. And you can talk about that and you can say, well, it's consensual. And it was consensual on Trump's part because he did prostitute himself in this.
Well, the biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And I think you know exactly what I'm saying. They had such power. Israel had such power, and rightfully, over Congress.
Rightfully?
Israel was the most powerful lobby in the country 15 years ago. Today, between Tlaib and AOC and all of these people, what they're doing, Israel, they don't have the backing that they once had.
You'll give it to them.
Yeah, I'm good.
He's prostituting himself. He says, you guys owned Congress, and rightfully so. How is that right for a foreign government to own our Congress? Well, that's right. And now you've lost that, but you can get that back with me.
Why do you think, Colonel, President Trump unleashed Prime Minister Netanyahu to resume genocide in Gaza, which unfortunately resulted, I say unfortunately, it was intentional, the killing of 400 civilians in the past 2 days?
I don't think he has any choice. I think when he ran for office, he made certain agreements with major donors. These donors move far beyond just Miriam Adelson. And these donors oblige him to effectively underwrite whatever Mr. Netanyahu wants to do. I thought it was interesting that a recent meeting was set up for the United States with Azerbaijan to talk about cooperation with Israel, but is set up by Mr. Netanyahu. He called and made the arrangements with Mr. Aliyev, who's the president of Azerbaijan. The State Department did not do it. I think we're very much in the grip of the Israel lobby, and I think President Trump is obliged to go along, and I don't see any evidence that he's going to diverge from that path.
Yeah, he sold himself into prostitution. That's exactly what has happened. And, of course, the transaction has been complete. He is their goy.
The United States backs Israel, but they back it less than they used to. I was having a lot of problems getting support for Israel, and I can't really understand it because I grew up in a world where everything evolved around politically. Everything evolved around Israel, and the power was amazing. One bad word about Israel, and you were virtually out of politics. Today, one good word about Israel, you're out of politics. But I'm still here, and we're leading in the polls by about 50
And actually, the Trump administration has tried to make it so that if one bad word of Israel, and you are out of public life.
As president,
you're accused of being a racist,
I was
falsely.
proud to be the best friend, they say the best president that Israel's ever had, actually.
That's his goal.
And it's a very interesting
Israel first.
Because in Israel, I could be elected prime minister today. If I ever decided to give this up.
I wish he would do that. I wish he would go to Israel or Venezuela. Every day we see another. I could be president of Venezuela. I'm so popular there. I could be president of Israel. I'm so popular there. Well, please go. The sooner the better. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. And it's people like Miriam Adelson. It's these, and Larry Ellison. It's these Zionist billionaires whose real agenda is to support Israel. But the way they do it is through Trump. And so that becomes his agenda as well. As a matter of fact, you've got protesters of Larry Ellison putting a sign on his super yacht showing that he is a propagandist for Trump. Well, that's just a part of it.
The French Riviera.
Larry Ellison is really a propagandist for Israel, for Zionism.
We're about to rename it.
And that's how these things merge together.
Man. He's a big Donald Trump supporter and a close friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. He once offered the Israeli Prime Minister a job at his company, and Netanyahu's family has holidayed on his private island. Ellison is also the largest private donor to the Israeli
Jewish billionaire, private island, making me nervous.
Ellison family control of TikTok in the US. Almost immediately, prominent pro-Palestinian voices were silenced. Last year, the Ellisons bought Paramount, giving them control over CBS News. The channel's coverage of the attack on Iran has been notably pro-war. And the Ellisons will soon take over Warner Brothers, giving them control of CNN. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently denounced CNN for being insufficiently supportive of Trump's war on Iran. Hegseth said he couldn't wait for the Ellisons to take over the channel. And Trump himself listed the CNN takeover as one of his wins. And that is why we've renamed this super yacht the Trump Propagandist. The billionaires are buying up the news to support their friends, the politicians pitching our world into chaos and war. Then they jump onto their super yachts, accountable to nobody.
Yeah, well, we know what their goal is. As a matter of fact, when you look at the people who are selling this, of course, he owns the networks and he's going to own most of the media. I remember nostalgically now, just a few years ago, when we were talking about how the media companies were combining and merging to we're only going to have a half dozen media companies. Well, forget about that. We're looking at one or two now. And so Mark Levin and Jonathan Pollard are both pushing for nuking Iran. There's your nuclear bomb, and it could be just a couple of weeks away. So there you go. But coming from Israel and not from Iran. As far as I'm concerned, both of these people are traitors. This is an article from Information Liberation. Chris Minahan, he says, Fox News host Mark Levin and U.S.-born Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard are both pushing their respective governments to use nuclear weapons against Iran. Why? Because they're genocidal madmen and racists. Levin and Pollard are connected through Levin's stepson, David Milstein, who the New York Times revealed in November 2025, held a quote-unquote friendly secret meeting with Pollard at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, together with another traitor to America, Mike Huckabee. And so again, this is Jonathan Pollard, the person who is perhaps the biggest traitor to the United States since Benedict Arnold. And it was Donald Trump who, because Miriam Adelson wanted him to get refuge in Israel, Trump pardoned him. She flew him on the jet, and we've all seen the pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu meeting him as he comes down the steps from the plane. And he gets down and he kisses the ground in Israel. Levin seems to be trying to implant in Trump's brain that he should use nuclear weapons against Iran to avoid high U.S. military casualties. He keeps referring back to, well, you know what happened with Japan when we used the thing? It was a good thing because we saved American lives. And look, let's understand that even if you believe that, even if you discount the involvement of Russia, their surrender came right after Russia got involved in the war with Japan as well. There was a halt after the war in Europe ended, and then they joined with the U.S. against Japan. And that happened right about the same time as the nuclear bomb. So was it one or was it the other? Regardless, bombing civilian populations is never justified, folks. They want to say, well, look at all the lives that would have been lost going from island to island fighting the Japanese military. Well, fine. Blow up island and island where the Japanese military are. Blow up their military installations with a nuclear weapon. You don't need to go after Nagasaki and use the only Christian church in Japan as ground zero. Is Mark Levin trying to implant in Trump's brain that he should nuke Iran in order to avoid U.S. military casualties, writes Chris Minahan. He says, note how he cites the Battle of Okinawa and says that's what convinced Truman that would lose 1 million men if we didn't drop the atomic bombs that we did. Tucker Carlson responded to the same clip and made the same point on his show a day later. Tucker said, Mark Levin is so subtly counseling President Trump to use nuclear weapons against Iran. And again, we see the same language is being used by Levin, the same language is being used by Pollard. The two of them are talking about ending the civilization of Iran. The two of them are talking about bombing them back in the Stone Age, and Trump is just plagiarizing them. Saturday, Levin went even further, and he made it blatantly obvious that he is indeed lobbying Trump to use nukes, all the while insisting that he wasn't, of course. In order to get the Japanese to surrender, we dropped 2 atomic bombs, says Mark Levin, continuing to urge Trump to use nuclear weapons against Iran, all the while insisting that he's not doing that. Levin is continuing to urge Trump to use nuclear weapons. And again, he says, told Trump, don't negotiate a deal. Have them surrender, right? Unconditionally surrender. And of course, there was a lot of conditions to this ceasefire, but of course, we're not allowed to see those conditions. We're supposed to believe that it's unconditional surrender because Trump is just so powerful. And he is, and he needs to have that power taken out of his hand.
I have never understood why anybody listened to Mark Levin. His voice is terrible, and he's a wretched human being. He's miserable and angry at all times. If I was on fire, Mark Levin could not sell me a bucket of water.
Well, you got to start with Rush Limbaugh, and Rush called him the Great One. And I always said, the way you spell that is Grate, because his voice is so grating, so whiny. But anyway, his politics are consistently wrong as well. From his push for a constitutional convention, the book that he wrote called The Liberty Amendments, it is a prescription for the overthrow of the Constitution, folks. Levin does all of his shows for an audience of one, and Trump has made it clear with his own public proclamations on Truth Social, telling people they need to watch this, watch Levin's program. Mark Levin is continuing to urge Trump to use nuclear weapons against Iran, all the while insisting that he's not. And so when we look at Jonathan Pollard, we're going to get to him because we're already over time. Jonathan Pollard is calling on Netanyahu and his own government to use their secret nuclear weapons that they've done in defiance of international treaties. They never signed on to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement. And yet, they're not the bad guys. Iran is. Iran signed on to the non-nuclear proliferation. Iran had a leader who, for religious reasons, a religious leader as well as a political leader, who said, we're not going to have nuclear weapons. And yet you have Jonathan Pollard, the American-born Israeli spy. So he said that they need to be bombed with nuclear weapons back to the Stone Age. As a matter of fact, here's Pollard talking about his experience when he was arrested as the most damaging spy to the American government. And remember that he got a lot of very compromising information that would put American military lives in danger. And he gave it to the Israeli government. The Israeli government gave it to the Soviet Union in exchange for prisoners. So it's not just Jonathan Pollard who betrayed America. It was the Israeli government as well.
What did they want me to do? No, what did they want me to do? They wanted me to sign a document implicating most of the American Jewish community's leadership in my activities. They wanted them implicated. It was a decapitation effort. And I noticed, Israel, that there were quite a few people on that list in front of me who were actively endorsing my execution at the time. But my father raised me never to Moser another Jew, never to betray another Jew. If it were in front of a kosher bed din, as my father said, that was one thing. But in front of the Goyim, no.
In front of the Goyim, no. This guy is an inveterate racist, a traitor, a spy, and Huckabee and Trump love him. Truly is amazing. And here he is talking about the Stone Age and how they need to be nuked.
If we act unilaterally and literally put Iran into the Stone Age, and I've already outlined how that could be done, what would happen at the end of the day was suddenly people may not like us anymore in this region, okay, but they would be afraid of us, okay, and the net result of that would be the expansion of the Abraham Accords. The United States is stumbling forward. If they actually knew the nature of the beast, there would have been a very large expeditionary force in place before the first bomb dropped.
American boots on the ground.
Number two, right off the bat, Iran's oil and gas infrastructure would have been annihilated. Kharg Island in particular would be...
Set the Middle East on fire, destroy everything. This is his plan. This guy's a madman.
Refinery would be twisted metal. The South Pars oil fields, gas fields rather, would be destroyed. We have to understand that at the end of the day, the United States does not have the stomach to do what it takes to destroy this regime.
What is
which
that?
Means
what is it? What is it that you think that the
kill
United
everybody
States doesn't have the stomach?
That's Zionism for you, right there. The face of Zionism, right there. That
put
guy.
Iran back into the Stone Age.
How? How would they do that? What are you suggesting?
Well, I've written quite a bit openly here about what we should do. The first thing is an electromagnetic pulse strike across Iran. If the enemy understands that there are limits past which we will not go, they've won.
So you think...
Yeah, we understand there are no limits to the so-called ethics of the Zionists, to the people like Netanyahu, Pollard, Miriam Adelson, and their partners and puppets, people like Trump and Mike Huckabee. Well, we're going to stop it at this point. Thank you for joining us. We've gone over quite a bit, so we're just going to cut it abruptly. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope we see you tomorrow. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.